My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
You're a startup founder. Finding product market fit is probably your number one priority. But to land bigger customers, you also need security compliance. Obtaining your SOC 2 or ISO 27001 certification can open those big doors, but they take time and energy, pulling you away from building and shipping. That's where Vanta comes in. Vanta is the all-in-one compliance solution helping startups get audit-ready and build a strong security foundation, quickly and painlessly. Vanta automates the manual security tasks that slow you down, helping you streamline your audit. The platform connects you with trusted experts to build your program, auditors to get you through audits quickly, and a marketplace for essentials like pen testing. So whether you're closing your first deal or gearing up for growth, Vanta makes compliance easy. Join over 8,000 companies, including Y Combinator and Techstar startups who trust Vanta. For a limited time, get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/simplify. That's VANTA.com/simplify for $1,000 off.
Sports Card Nation, the hobby is the people. Weekly news and interviews, it's your number one source. Sports Card Nation, the hobby is the people. Sports Card Nation.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 319 of Sports Card Nation. If you've been a fan of the show for any length of time, you probably know we do have some sponsors of the program. That is nothing new. But, you know, like I always talk about sponsors, we're only going to have sponsors of products that we either use or can recommend using. I don't just take them for the sake of taking them. I've turned people away. I've said no. But today we're going to have the owner of one of our sponsors, Ep.319, Isaac Alpert, and we're going to talk about, you know, starting a hobby supply company when there's some big boys in that arena. We're not just going to talk about the Pennysleever, but we're going to talk about how he launched his company with his wife, and we're going to talk about the hobby as well. He's a collector himself, and I think there's something to be said about being a collector who designs supplies rather than just being even an entrepreneur who's not in the hobby, just looking to start a business, right? I think there's a difference there. We're going to talk about that and much more. So really happy to have Isaac on the show today and learn about a little more about him, a little bit more about his company. So a quick break, and we'll be back with Isaac Alpert.
Hi, I'm Isaac Alpert, a longtime card collector and the co-founder of the Pennysleever. My wife and I started the Pennysleever with a simple premise in mind: to offer collectors top quality supplies at fair prices. We offer a full range of hobby supplies, and we'll get them to you fast. Whether you're looking for a 260-point magnetic for that oversized patch card, or a slew of semi-rigids for your next PSA submission, the Pennysleever has you covered. Shop now at thepennysleever.com and use the promo code SCNation to get 10% off your first order. That's SCNation for 10% off at thepennysleever.com. Hi, I'm Isaac Alpert, a longtime card collector and the co-founder of the Pennysleever. My wife and I started the Pennysleever with a simple premise in mind: to offer collectors top quality supplies at fair prices. We offer a full range of hobby supplies, and we'll get them to you fast. Whether you're looking for a 260-point magnetic for that oversized patch card, or a slew of semi-rigids for your next PSA submission, the Pennysleever has you covered. Shop now at thepennysleever.com and use the promo code SCNation to get 10% off your first order. That's SCNation for 10% off at thepennysleever.com. The Pennysleever, top quality supplies, fair prices. The Pennysleever, top quality supplies, fair prices.
Happy to be joined on the Sports Card Shop guest line by my next guest, Mr. Isaac Alpert, CEO, along with his wife. I want to make sure I give proper credit, and I'm sure he'll do the same, of the Pennysleever.com. Full transparency. They are a sponsor of this show, one of them. But it's like I always tell you folks is I don't have sponsors that I don't believe or use the products, and I've used said products, and they are very good, and they are definitely more affordable than maybe some of the bigger name brands out there, but just do the same or better. So there's my little disclaimer, but without further ado, Isaac, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, John. I really appreciate taking the time to talk to you.
No problem. Let's start off with we're definitely gonna deep dive. What you do, what the company you created, and the importance of it. But obviously you're in the hobby to begin with. Kind of every time somebody's first appearance on the show, it's kind of the start off question is like, how did the hobby begin for you?
Yeah, it's my story in a lot of ways is probably very similar to what a lot of people have said. When I was a kid, I used to take my paper route money and go to this was back when cards were sold at candy stores and the local convenience store, and I started collecting that way. First set I remember was 1980 Topps, and then into the bountiful years with Fleer and Donruss. And, I started collecting as a kid, like just about everybody else, and not particularly discriminating back then, collecting sets, trying to put together the set every year, trading with my friends. And that was the start of it. And then, like a lot of people, when I entered my teen years, started to feel a little self-conscious about my collecting. And, my income started going more towards social life and dating and less towards collecting. And I sort of put it aside, and it was a little bit of a shameful secret. I tried to keep up with what was going on in cards, but, it was more like picking up a pack of cards now and then, and just to see what they were, and then went away from it into adulthood. And then in about 2014 or 2015, I got interested again. I downloaded the Topps Bunt app and was playing around with this. At the time, I was living overseas and didn't have easy access to shopping for cards. And so Bunt kind of got me back into collecting again around 2015, and then started dabbling a little bit more in physical cards. And that's where we are today.
Has your, kind of coming back, you mentioned the Bunt app kind of lit that fire again. Did some of the changes in the hobby kind of either catch you off guard or surprise you? Like talk a little bit about like the return. And did your interest remain true, or did you kind of like change how you collected?
Absolutely, it's changed. I mean, it was kind of a caveman kind of realization. Going from my serious collecting back when I was a kid, when, there were no autographs, no memorabilia cards, no chase cards, no numbered cards. And then kind of leaping into this era where, everything was very different. It took a lot of getting used to. When I started collecting again, it was very non-discriminate. I mean, I'm now primarily a team collector. I'll talk more a little bit about it if you're interested, but I'm a Padres fan, and I collect primarily Padres cards. Some would say that I hoard Padres cards. I'm actually spent a little time last evening going through them, and I'm kind of amazed at how the pile has grown. But I'm also, I'm a bit eclectic. I'm a Trailblazers fan in basketball and a Packers fan in football. And so when I got back into collecting, I didn't have any idea, cards were cards. And so I would buy into an occasional break to try to get some Trailblazers or some Padres. And sometimes I didn't even really know what the sets were. I mean, having such a variety, it's a blessing and a curse, but there was definitely a learning curve. And I've always been interested in learning as much about the hobby as I could. Back when I was a kid, I used to read Tough Stuff and Baseball Cards Magazine and SCD. And then, flashing forward to 2015, I started discovering Blowout forums and Net 54. And so it was always a lot of learning involved. But, when I first started buying cards again, I had no idea what I was getting into.
You mentioned those three teams with the Packers, the Trailblazers, and the Padres. Was it a player for each team that made you gravitate to the team? Obviously, they're in different locations. It's not, it's not like you're a Rangers, Mets, and a Knicks fan, that sort of thing. What were there individual players that sort of led to like, hey, I'm just going to collect this team as well as player, or not necessarily?
Not so much. I mean, sort of the player following came later. For each team, there's a little bit of a story involved.
Sure.
If
you don't mind, go ahead.
I'm a bit long-winded, but I love telling this story. The Padres in particular. I grew up outside of Boston, and so my earliest memories, my father, my grandfather were Red Sox and Celtics and Bruins and Patriots fans. And so, naturally you gravitate towards the local teams. When I probably would have been about 1980, there was a remake of the movie The Kid from Left Field with Gary Coleman. And the team in which, I don't know if anyone is even familiar with the original or the remake, but the premise is that a child becomes the manager of a major league team. In this case, it was Gary Coleman. And the team that he was managing was the Padres. And this was back in the glorious era of the brown and yellow and just incredibly garish. And I just happened to love the way the announcer said San Diego Padres. And, but this was, of course, I know some of your listeners are probably quite young and don't remember a pre-internet era, but this was back in the era of box scores and newspapers and one game a week on television. And so it wasn't that strange that I really didn't know who the Padres were. And I just happened to like the name and the colors. And from that point forward, that was my team. And and so it's a pretty strange way of developing an allegiance, but that's how it happened for me. The color scheme and the sound of the name was enticing enough to capture me. And now, 40 some odd years later, a lot of downs, a few ups, but I'm a loyal Padres.
Yeah, I love those stories, right? And for a lot, I'm sure a lot of people listening to you, Isaac, and can relate to that. Sometimes it's a team color, it can be a commercial. I mean, for me, I'm a New York City kid, and I'm a Steelers fan, since 1977. With the Mean Joe Green Coke commercial, and that kid.
Yes, the towel.
Yeah, and that kid had a resemblance to me at that time. We're really the same age at that time, and obviously today he's still around. He's not in show business anymore, but he's known for that commercial. We're the same age, and between the resemblance of me and the kid actor in the show. Same thing. I like those Steeler jersey colors, the black and the gold. In the commercial was the white and the gold. And, I'm not going to lie, it didn't hurt that they were winning at that time. They were in the midst of their kind of Super Bowl runs. And that's what did it for me. And I took a lot of heat from my New York City friends. Like, how do you like the Steelers, Newman? They're in Pittsburgh. You got to like the Jets or the Giants. And I'm like, I don't like the Jets or the Giants. I didn't have an interest to those teams, and I never wavered. I took my share of some local abuse, in New York. But and like you said, a lot of sure there was a few Super Bowls in there in the early part of my fandom, and then the '80s were very, very thin. Being a Steeler fan, and I never got no one can say, oh, you jumped off the bandwagon, when they were struggling. I'm still here. Like you said, 40 something years later, and still. So it's those stories that I think we all have for the most part. You're either like a fan because you're in that locale, or there's a story like that why you're not. And I love those stories. You were a Padres fan pre Tony Gwynn, and then obviously he came along, one of the greatest hitters baseball has ever seen. And, I love those stories too, because I thought you might have said, well, I was a big Tony Gwynn. and I almost
And I was, of course.
yeah, but like you were a Padres fan, first. They just happened to be on the Padres. So I always love those kind of connections and kind of how it all started. And I mean, is how about you have time for like the Packers and Trailblazers? Is there similar
Sure.
stories there?
Yeah, I mean, not quite as interesting, I don't think. But with the Packers, I think I was actually talking with my family over Thanksgiving. I might have actually manufactured this whole story, but my recollection was that my mother had bought me a shirt, I think at Marshalls or TJ Maxx, probably about the same time as the Padres thing. And it happened to be a Lynn Dickey jersey. And I may have filled in some of the details around it as I've gone along. My recollection was that she thought that the yellow would sort of match my Padres, and that's why she chose it. But it was probably just one of those $8 jerseys in the discount rack, but it fit, and all of a sudden that became my team. And playing in the yard, I was Lynn Dickey, and that was how my my Packers fandom.
Hey, it's funny, even, hearing you talk about that, I remember pictures. I probably still have them in my like photo box of when I was a kid. And there's one photo I remember I was wearing an Eagles sweatshirt. I wasn't an Eagles fan. I'm in New York City. So I have no idea where the sweatshirt came from. It didn't change my fandom. I mean, I just wore it, or I was told to wear it, maybe even like, hey, get ready for school. And I happen to have a picture, and someone's seen it, one of my family members who knows I'm a huge Steeler fan, and they're like, are you sure you're a Steeler fan? Look at this photo. I think it was my son. And I'm like, Jordan, I don't know the backstory there. There's, obviously there's a photo with me in an Eagles sweatshirt, but I was a Steelers fan. I wore the sweatshirt. I don't know if it was a hand-me-down. I don't know if it was I don't even know anything where it came from. Did my grandma get it and, as a present? Did she think I said Eagles and I got that? I don't know all the tentacles to it, but I've been a Steelers fan since 1977. But it's funny how, whether it be colors or something given to you can, sway your fandom. And just to kind of close it out too, Isaac, with the Trailblazers, how did one become a Trailblazer, especially at Boston with the Celtics?
Well, and again, I still have sort of vestigial feelings for all of the local teams, but the Trailblazers, it's not quite so interesting. I was living in Portland, and I was there for about a year, and I adopted the team. This would have been the late 90s. And they were a good team, but again, I like the colors as much as anything. There seems to be an aesthetic element. I have perhaps questionable aesthetic taste, but there definitely has to be an appealing jersey behind the fandom as well. But not quite as interesting as a Gary Coleman movie, but that's how that came about.
No, it's funny. I read a book years back. I don't even, not on purpose, but I don't remember the author, but it was about fandom. And it was, kind of, he wrote rules to fandom. And one of his rules is, you can change your team, like your favorite team, anytime to anything you want before the age of 14. And then after the age of 14, you have to lock in to a team. And then the exceptions is if you move to a different city, you can then change your allegiance to the local team. And it's funny hearing you say, like, hey, I lived in Portland. That it reminded me of that book and that rule that author, instilled that, hey, you at 14, you're locked in. But if you move, whether it be for work or you move with family, you can pledge allegiance to the new city that you're, the locale you're in. So, according to this book, I think it was something called like the Rules of Fandom or something like that. And I read it. It's not a big book, and just kind of goes over how people pick teams. And then he took it upon himself, like, hey, we don't really have a rule book, so I'm created one with book. And that was one of those rules. So hearing you say, hey, I lived in Portland, it reminded me of that book and that rule.
Yeah, I find it very interesting. I mean, I've sort of done this as a thought experiment, and it's sort of hard to imagine what would, what would be the breaking point with my fandom. And it's sort of, it's like trying to change your birth date. You can lie to yourself about doing it, but deep down inside, like right now, I mean, I don't want to get too much into it, but I'm not a huge fan of the Trailblazers coaching staff, and I would be much happier with just about anybody in charge of that team. And I've been watching fewer games. I still follow the team, but it's still my team. And my allegiance is deeper than the individual who's coaching or the players. And I just sort of wonder to myself, what could a team have to do to make me break that bond? And they haven't reached that point yet. So it's interesting to talk about fandom.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of close the segment, the question out with this too. We saw what just happened in Oakland when they played their last game there, and that stadium was packed. And, I watched it on TV. Obviously, I wasn't there, but, people very emotional and tears flowing. And, they did some interviews. I heard and some people were like, hey, wherever the team moves, whether it be Sacramento, Las Vegas, I'm an A's fan and I can't change that. It's in my blood. And then other people are like, hey, I'm an Oakland fan. And if they're not in Oakland, I can pick I'm going to have to pick a new allegiance. But, they were mad at the ownership and the leadership of the club. And so they weren't going to follow, they were, and I get it. They're mad that the team is basically being yanked from their city. And they're like, I'm not going to support that, unless they came back to Oakland. They're not the Oakland A's. So you have both sides of that coin, and they're both fans, right? They're both were Oakland A's fans. Some are going to stay loyal, and some are like, no, you do this to me, you don't get my allegiance. So it's the same situation, but there's two dichotomies there of, what direction a fan will go. And I found that. So when you said, what does it take to where I'm not a fan anymore? And there's a situation, which doesn't happen that often, but where a team gets pulled out of a city and relocated. So
yeah, it always feels. I feel from a distance the pain of the fan bases.
Time for a quick break, but we'll be right back.
Iron Sports Cards is your #1 source for all your PSA and other grading submissions. Their elite status improves turnaround times. Heck, they even provide the card savers. Their chat rooms provide updates on all your submissions. They also offer wax options and single cards to cover all the bases. Check them out on Facebook at Iron Sports Cards Group or on the web at ironsportscards.com, or even give them a call at 1-877-IRON-PSA. Rob's got you covered.
Sports Card Nation has returned.
I think this is true for all of us. And again, I'm sorry to belabor the point here, but
Nope.
It's sort of like time begins around the time when you're 9 or 10. And so, the Expos belong in Montreal because they were there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there are people older than me that say, the A's were from Kansas City. And then there's, their great grandparents telling them, no, Philadelphia. But then, you sort of, there's that childhood concept of what sports should look like. Any deviation from that is sort of, it still feels abnormal now. Washington doesn't have a baseball team. They're the Expos. It's just a temporary setback that's now lasted 2 decades or whatever it's been.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And, I read that book, and I sort of, many of the rules that were in the book, I actually, I chuckled at, because I kind of, I agreed with him for the most part. Maybe not across but that's the beauty, right? As fandom, we can make our own rules. There is no official rule. Maybe the book, the author thinks he has it, but we can change. We can do what our heart tells us to do.
Absolutely, yeah.
Speaking of heart telling us what to do, it's a good segue. You launched the Pennysleever.com. Find supplies for the hobby. Now, we have obviously other supply companies. We don't have to mention names, but what was it that caused the light bulb to go off? And you created this company. What led to that, I guess, is a short version.
I wouldn't say that there was a single light bulb moment. There were probably a number of things that all kind of led to the Pennysleever. Before the Pennysleever, I was a teacher for many years. I lived overseas. I think I mentioned. I was living in Asia for about 20 years, teaching in Korea and Hong Kong, mostly high school. And, I was very happy. I loved teaching. I enjoyed it enormously. But probably around COVID time, things started to change a little bit. And I think, like a lot of people, I had the opportunity to kind of evaluate where my life was and where it was going. And if there were a single moment, it didn't lead directly to the Pennysleever, but there was a particular card. I can't even remember the exact card now, but it was kind of an odd, probably a basketball patch card. Might have been a 180 or 260. And living in Hong Kong, I didn't, and just particularly during COVID, didn't have easy access to supplies. Did what a lot of people do, looked on eBay, looked on Amazon. And I was shocked to find out that it was about $6 or whatever it was for this odd sized magnetic. And I kind of asked myself, why? A 35-point magnetic, you can pick it up for a couple of bucks. There isn't that much more plastic in it. The magnet's not that much more powerful. Why is this, $6 or $7? This really seems like, it seemed like price gouging, to be honest. Obviously, in the whole scheme of the universe, the price of hobby supplies isn't, the most important thing. But why are hobbyists getting cheated? Why are they spending so much money on what's essentially the same thing as a real common object? And I'd like to say that light bulb struck in that moment. I gave up teaching and devoted my life to finding ways to bring reasonably priced hobby supplies to the world. But, it didn't. Like a lot of things, it happened, but it kind of stuck in my head. And that was sort of the genesis for it. This question, why does this supply, why do the odd supplies, the larger sizes, the less commonly used supplies, why are these so much more expensive? And then as time passed and my wife and I started more seriously discussing coming to the US, and, I started thinking about what I wanted to do and, what we wanted to do as a family. And I really wanted to do something, that we controlled. I wanted to start some sort of business, and it just sort of seemed like a natural. I mean, I went away from collecting, but, my sports fandom was always there, and I've always enjoyed collecting. And, it just looked like an area that, there may be room for somebody to step in and sort of fill this little niche that we identified. And so all of these things combined sort of to kind of plant the idea. And then, being in Hong Kong, we had access to a number of the factories right across the bay. And so we were able to get samples, a few years before we even started. And, we started looking more deeply into the collectible supply side of the business. And, the more we talked about it, the more we said, if we're going to do it, let's just go ahead and do it. And then, flash forward to May, and we got up and running.
It's launching any sort of business. I don't care what industry you're in. It's always daunting, right? It may be a little nervous and scary sometimes, depending on what's involved. Knowing, like, I know you're overseas too, but like knowing that this was an arena that already had some big combatants in it, like, how much did that weigh on what to do, or was it a price point? Like, hey, I can make products better or just as good and at a lower price point. How did you, in your mind, how did that all, lay out for you?
I think it was equal parts not knowing exactly what we were getting into and not being afraid to take the chance. I think we looked at it as a calculated gamble. Yeah, obviously there are a lot of established brands, but we thought that we could do it better. We pride ourselves on service. A lot of people say this, but it's just my wife and I. And, the blessing and the curse of being small is that we have that ability that, we take care of things. Part of it, I think, was just that the bliss of not really knowing what we were getting into. We decided once we committed to doing it, we committed to doing it. And I don't have a very strong business background. And so that probably, the things I didn't know didn't scare me. And so, a lot of people spend a lot of their lives being afraid to take chances. And, and I'm not going to lie, I was one of them, but we decided that this would be a great opportunity. And I've been very fortunate in my life. I had a wonderful career. I have a very supportive wife who said that if you think that we can make this work, let's go ahead and do it. And I can honestly say that I don't regret it one bit. I think, I think that what we're doing, it's exciting. Every day is a new challenge, but I love it. I love waking up in the morning and knowing that, we're playing a small part in making people's collecting lives a little bit better.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, I've used your supplies. No complaints and rave reviews, right? It does what it's supposed to do, right? Protect our cherished collectibles and when you launched, did everything go pretty smooth, or were there hiccups along the way?
Every day has been a hiccup. I'm sorry. I laugh when you say that. Yeah, of course there have been a lot of hiccups, but that's what makes it exciting. One of the great things about teaching is that no 2 days were ever alike, and that no day ever went exactly as you planned. And, when I was teaching, were there days that I went home fuming and swearing and saying, I'm never doing this again and I'm never going back? Of course, any teacher who says otherwise is lying. If you care, then you're taking chances. When you take chances, things go wrong. The same thing has been true since we got started. We sort of foolishly thought that, getting up and running was going to be the hard part. And we learned on day 2 that is not the case. We set up a website and there it was. And then, we sat around and waited. And it was a pretty exciting moment. We were, again, very fortunate. I think it was day 1, about 6 hours after we launched, that we had a customer. And, obviously we believed that we were going to succeed, but even with that belief, having that first customer, it was sort of a revelation, like somebody that we don't know is willing to take a chance with us. And we've been very grateful, ever since, that we've gotten such great support from the collector community. But yeah, it's been hiccup after hiccup. You learn as you go. And that's like, I keep coming back to the same thing, but that's what makes it fun. It's sort of like, the thrill of opening a pack of cards is you don't know what's inside. The thrill of waking up in the morning is you just don't know what the business is going to throw at you. And that's how it's been so far.
One of the reasons I asked that, Isaac, is not to make you feel bad or bring up, something that's, maybe not the best part of owning your own business. But, everyone who doesn't do it right thinks it's easy, and it's not. Whether it's launching a podcast or launching a supply company, right? But it's that perseverance and dedication, right, that gets you to where you need to be and where you want to go. So that's why I asked, and just to there's going to be bumps in the road, right? No matter what field or what you just got to work through it. I know it's cliche, but whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, type of thing. And like you said,
absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I completely agree with that, because if you don't encounter, conflict, then you're probably not trying hard enough. Whether it's, collecting cards or running a podcast or running a business, if you're not taking enough chances, if you're not challenging yourself every day, then, you're probably not doing it right. What's the fun in that?
Yeah, no doubt. When you first launched, like you said, 6 hours in, you had your first sale. That obviously was encouraging. When you go to any business, right? If you walk into an established business, you look on the back wall. They usually have like their first dollar that was spent, on the wall. For you, it was 6 hours in. Talk about like when you first launched. What what products did you offer then, and kind of a comparison now, that you're even more established? How, in other words, the trajectory of the pennies.
Well, when we began, we decided that we were going to start with, sort of your vanilla supplies, the most basic supplies, your top loaders from 35 point up to 360. Same with the magnetics, thick card sleeves, regular card sleeves, team bags. Basically, if you were going to start a collection, the range of supplies that you would need. And right now, we're in the course of expanding our line. In fact, we just have our next shipment on the way, and we're going to be expanding into a little bit more variety. Things like the top loaders with colored borders, different styles of sleeves, more for the graded card collector. We're trying to find things where we can reach you no matter how you collect. And going forward, we have a lot of plans to go more deeply into catering to vintage collectors, because we feel that they are underserved. That's a little bit further down the road. One of the little hiccups that we were discussing, but it's still in the works. We should have it by hopefully. I hesitate to give a date, because I've been giving dates and they're always wrong. Let's just say sometime early to mid next year, 2025, we'll have those. And also, rather excitingly, we're learning quite a bit about TCGs, and we're looking to kind of grow that area of the business as well. So, we started with just the very basics. And one of the things about being small is that we have no choice but to listen to what people want. And one of the real nice things about doing card shows, which is something that we started early on, is that we can talk to people directly. There's no hiding behind a website, and we've gotten a lot of feedback, and we try to accommodate what people tell us that they want, because ultimately we're here to serve collectors.
Yeah, and I love hearing you say that, right? You're, like you said, you're not hiding behind, a screen, and you're out there talking with people. You're a collector yourself, right? What better? I always, we've seen other companies, and I'm not even talking just supplies, but I'm just talking hobby companies in general, that went outside the hobby and hired like a CEO or someone in charge of pushing a lot of the buttons. And in most of those cases, Isaac, it really kind of blew up in their face, and it was not a really positive outcome. I think it's important, if you're running a hobby company, that you're familiar with the terrain and landscape, such as you are as a collector yourself, because like, hey, I want this. Chances are other people want this too, or I don't like what this product does. We can do it better, because you're already using some of the existing stuff. Does being part of the hobby, and I mean, I'm sort of answering this question for you, but I'll let you speak to it. Like, being a hobby member, I think that gives you an advantage too, because you know what people want, because you yourself might want to see it if it's not in existence yet.
Yeah, absolutely. It does cut both ways, though. I mean, the hardest thing is sort of putting your own ego aside. Like when we were in the planning stages, obviously, I was able to call on my own hobby knowledge in terms of what do we need. But the other side of the coin is that not everybody collects the same way that I do. Not everybody is interested in the same things that I am, and it's very important for me to kind of hit pause on my own collector's perspective and just be open-minded to other people's. And, that's really been important for us so far. It's very humbling when we do. I keep coming back to the card show thing, but it's quite humbling, because I find it, I won't say frustrating, but, a little bit repetitive how often I say no, because a lot of people come to us because they're not able to find the things that they're looking for. And it's really frustrating for me to be able to have to say, I'm sorry, we don't have that yet. Sign up for the mailing list, and, hopefully we'll have that for you in the future. And, it's also, very inspiring how many people are willing to take that chance, because, I am asking the questions and I am listening, and, I do try to accommodate that. But yeah, not everybody collects the same way I do. Not everybody uses the same supplies that I do.
I want to thank Isaac Alpert for joining the show. Also, one of our great sponsors, right? The Pennysleever.com. Go to the show notes, get your discount code, and go over there. Great supplies, low prices, 10% off with that discount code. And it was fun chopping up some hobby with Isaac. We're not done. We'll be back with more next Friday on the second half of our conversation. So we'll have Isaac back next week. But, runs a great business along with his wife, and uses semi-rigids, top loaders, penny sleeves, obviously. They have plenty of other supplies as well. And why pay more for the same or better quality? There's no reason to. All right, let's hear from our Hobby is the People announcer of the week. Some closing thoughts, and we'll wrap up this week's episode.
Time for our Hobby is the People announcer of the week.
This is Rob Petrozzo from Rally, reminding you that the hobby is the people. It's not any corporations or breaks. It's not even fractional companies. It's not any of that. It's people, and the people that make collecting great and make it what it is.
If you'd like to be the Hobby is the People announcer of the week, do a WAV or MP3 file and send it to sportscardnationpc@gmail.com.
That's a wrap for this week. Huge thanks to you, the listeners out there, because without you, there is no us. If you like the show, we truly appreciate positive reviews. Big ups to our great guests who drive the show and our awesome sponsors who make it all possible. Sports Card Nation will be back next week, but don't forget to catch either Hobby Quick Hits or Card Mentions coming up on Monday. I'll leave you with this. How do we change the world? One random act of kindness at a time. Remember, the hobby is the people.
For nearly 50 years, Sports Collectors Digest has been the voice of the hobby, bringing you comprehensive coverage of the sports collectible industry. From industry news, auction results, market analysis, and in-depth stories about collectors and their collections, Sports Collectors Digest has everything you need to know about the hobby. SCD is also your leading source for listings of sports collectible dealers, card shops, card shows, and the latest from the industry's top companies. To check out all the latest news or to subscribe to the hobby's oldest magazine, visit sportscollectorsdigest.com or call 1-800-829-5561.
Hobby Hotline is the hobby's only live interactive call-in show. Join some of your favorite hobby personalities every Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, to discuss the hottest hobby topics. If you miss us live, catch us after the fact on all major podcast platforms. Follow us on socials at Hobby Hotline.